freaking first cut. Golly.
Welcome to the First Cut Podcast. I'm Rick Gehman, and this is your DFS preview for this week's Waste Management Open. And joining me to break it all down, Greg DuCharme is snowed in, but he's here. Hey, Greg.
It is, I'm here in Connecticut. It is crazy outside. My window, I can barely see if it's still snowing. The windows are like, I'm almost literally snowed in. I tried to take my son out this morning. He wanted to go outside, and I've never heard him complain being outside about cold. And right away, we lasted 3 minutes. Took about 30 bundling up, getting ready to go. We lasted 3 minutes outside, but happy to be here tonight.
Well, we've got you locked and loaded in front of the computer for the foreseeable future, right? You're not going anywhere.
I'm not going anywhere. I'm locked in.
Let's talk some golf. Nejad is back. You are in much warmer conditions. You do not have snow outside, but we still welcome you.
75 degrees and sunny. And by the way, guys, did anything weird or curious happen in golf this last weekend? I missed it. Any rules violations, anything like that?
Business as usual. Last I saw, I was telling these guys before we went hot, the amount of messages I got, was like, whether you are the smartest guy in the world or you are the dumbest guy in the world, there was certainly no gray area when it comes to Patrick Reed takes from the last couple of days. So I assume there will be much more discussion about that in the future. It's wild stuff. But we've got golf. We've got Waste Management Open this week, Greg, an absolute staple on the schedule. Not only is it a great event, not only is it a great course, it's one that everyone should be familiar with. It's in every video game. We'll talk about it in a second. But the alignment with a somewhat sizable football game on Sunday evening makes this all the better for just an awesome sports weekend.
It's a great tradition on the PGA Tour. I love the Saturday. Typically is one of the biggest sporting days of the year. Sunday may be a little bigger, not necessarily in the game of golf, but I like the way that they have this set up. So you're right, Rick. Great sporting weekend altogether, Saturday and Sunday.
It's not going to have the same vibe as a normal Waste Management. Obviously, this is one of the largest, most raucous fan experiences. They routinely break the record for most attended golf event. I believe the record was a couple of years ago. I think it was 218,000 in a single day. We're going to see, I think, 8, I think is what they're letting in this time around. So there's going to be some things that look weird. There's going to be some things that sound a little bit different, but there will be fans out there.
Yeah. And by the way, we just mentioned the NFL. They allowed fans at some of those games. And even though it was like 1/10 of the capacity, you really felt the energy. I mean, some of these playoff games you could really hear the fans. So I think it's kind of all a matter of perspective. Yeah, it's not going to be 200,000 plus, but I think we're going to see feel a much different experience with just a handful of fans in there. So I'm actually really excited. And I think the adrenaline's really going to be rushing for the golfers themselves too, because you go from 0 or let's say 15 or 25 that might be cheering for you on one hole to a few thousand or 5 or 7,000. It is a different experience. I think it's going to be way more exciting than people think from that perspective.
Remember when Rory was counting people like right after the restart and he was like 16, 17, 18, like, what are you guys doing out here? That was the best. Greg, have you seen what they've done with 16? Have you seen what it looks like this year?
I haven't seen it this year. I haven't seen the footage yet. I'm excited to see what it looks like. I mean, I think that is typically that is the hole I'm looking forward to most. I'm probably not the only one, but it's typically it's a wedge. It's a very easy hole, but it becomes difficult because you get booed if you miss the green. It could be a foot off. It could be on the fringe. You get booed. So I'm looking forward to seeing what that energy is like. And if that hole plays the way you would expect it to, a wedge on the PGA Tour, or if there's still a little bit of nerves, if there are a couple of thousand people on that hole. So I'm looking forward to seeing.
A wedge off a tee on that hole and on 17 at Sawgrass are like the two easiest shots these guys hit on a regular basis, except for the fact that everything else is going on and you've got the island green at Sawgrass. So what it looks like is they still have the stadium set up, but there is not as much, I guess, I don't know how to describe, like stadium seating. There is it's almost exclusively kind of like boxes across the top. So you're not going to have rows and rows and rows of fans down towards the green, but they still have the stadium set up. See, there is still going to be the atmosphere. It's not going to be like when Tiger made his ace there in 90 whatever, where it was just nothing out there. It's going to look similar, but just be a little bit different.
Yeah, and I guess that's what I was saying initially. I think we're going to feel that energy, and honestly, I'm just really excited to have fans back on a course, like appreciable size of fans. So yeah, I mean, let's get started. There's so many guys at the top, Rick. I'm super excited.
Okay, we're showing this right now. So Aaron Oberholzer was on the scene. This is the video that I saw. So producer Jacob has it up in YouTube right now. So you can see the stadium is still set up there, but not as many seats, and most of them just across the top. Yeah, pretty slick,
Very
right?
cool.
I like that a lot. As far as this course goes, so Scottsdale, TPC Scottsdale, Greg, I mentioned it. It's been in every video game forever. Everybody knows this course. It's a par 71, so there's only 3 par 5s. It's back on Bermuda, and you know how I love to run the numbers on this one, Greg, and I ran everything out there, and strokes gained approach, it was more important here, TPC Scottsdale, than any other course on the PGA Tour. So think about that. Strokes gained approach, already a very important stat week in and week out. More important here than any other course. And it kind of passes the sniff test, Greg, because think about the winners. You know, Hideki's won twice, Webb, Fowler in his prime. I'm missing one from like the last 5 years, but they're ball strikers that get it done here.
Another interesting, we've had a lot of playoffs here of late, but I went through a couple of the recent winners and the players who ended up losing in a playoff. And Webb Simpson last year was second approach in strokes gained approach the green. Tony Finau was 8th last year. He lost in a playoff. Ricky Fowler was kind of the exception. When he won, he led in strokes gained putting, and he didn't really have a great iron play week. So that was a little bit of a unique circumstance. That was where his ball rolled back in the water. He tried to give it away. But Ricky did it a little differently.
Does that hurt your strokes gained around the green number when your ball, like you haven't even hit it and it just rolls back in?
I think that hurts your, that's a great question.
Or does it hurt your
I would
approach
imagine
number?
it has to hurt your approach, right? Because you took the original penalty. I don't know if it hurts it. It's got to come factor in somewhere.
Yeah, because you made a number that was higher than the number you were supposed to make from the position that you were in. I guess I could go back and look that up, but that was a super weird. I remember watching that live, Greg, and being like, "Oh my God, his ball's moving! Oh my, Ricky, like turn around, dude!
Go get it! It's going to go in the water." Yeah, but he was tied 20th approaching the green. You had Gary Woodland was 3rd in 2018, and then Hideki in 2017 was 2nd. So in the past 5 years, you've definitely, the guys who have won have done great with their iron play, Ricky being the exception. And again, it wasn't bad. The other thing that I noticed, Rick, is the players who win here have great recent form coming in on that same list. You look at the guys who did it, and you had Webb Simpson last year had a 3rd at the Sony leading into it. And it's a short window where you have that history leading in. Tony Finau had a tied 6th at the Farmers and a tied 14th at the Amex. So he was in good form coming in. You had Ricky Fowler had some really nice performances in November, kind of the year before. Gary Woodland was tied 12th at Farmers, tied 7th at the Sony in 2017. So, I mean, Ches Reavie in 2018 had 6 straight top 25s leading into the Career Builder, which was the event before. So players have had 2 things that I found. One is the iron play, strokes gained approach. Greens regulation seems to be pretty good too. And the second thing is recent form.
I absolutely love that. And Sia, before we jump into this, the last thing that I remember, this event's so memorable because it is on such a big day and it's a great event and all that stuff. So when Ricky finished runner up to Hideki, I was holding a Ricky ticket and he was like 2 up with 2 to go. And then they went to a playoff and Hideki beats him in the playoff. But I was avenged last year holding a Webb Simpson ticket. He's 2 down with 2 to go. Birdie's the last 2, clips Tony Finau in a playoff. So through this tournament, square, I'm even Steven, and now I start from scratch again this year.
Wow, Rick, what a surprise. So Tony Finau blew it at the end. Man, I can't believe that happened.
It is shocking, isn't it? I don't think he's ever done that before. All right, gentlemen, here's what we're going to do. We're going to jump into this, but first, you gotta remember that the biggest sporting spectacle of the year is nearly upon us. We know everyone loves making their picks, no matter if you're a diehard fan or just tuning in for the big game. So we think you'll love this opportunity. Enter the CBS Sports Football Props game for your chance to compete for $1 million. We got to get $1 million pot in the golf props. But anyway, $1 million for the football props. That's right. If you correctly answer all of the questions, you are guaranteed $50,000 to the winner, and you can win all that money without risking anything. Football Props is free to play. Just visit cbssports.com/props or download the CBS Sports app to enter. Greg, that's a lot of money, buddy. That'd be nice.
Yeah, I could. I can think of a few ways to spend that. Count me in.
You could get a snowblower and just get yourself out of this situation pretty quickly.
Yeah, I'm not sure how I'd get it in. We'd have to work on that. I'd have to maybe fly it in with a helicopter or something. I don't know how that would work. You know what I'd do, Rick? I'd pay someone to snowblow it for me.
That's right. That's somebody else's problem. You've got $1 million. Gentlemen, let's start at the top of the board. And the $10,000 range is 5 wide. John Rahm, 11,200. Xander Schauffele, and even 11,000. Justin Thomas, back from the Middle East, 10,800. Rory McIlroy making his debut in Phoenix, 10,600. And Webb Simpson, your defending champion, 10,100. See ya. Where are we going, man? There's a lot to talk about here.
It's really tough to criticize any one of these 5, obviously. So I'm not gonna dig too deep here. And I don't want to be too clouded by recency bias, but I gotta say, I really like how John Rahm and Xander Schauffele played last week, especially Xander. You know, we weren't sure if he was going to make the cut. We know his history last week in La Jolla, like it's just, or at Torrey, it's just not very good. And he battled, and all of a sudden, you know, he's near the top with at least an outside shot to win if Patrick Reed stumbles a little bit. I really, obviously, from an approach standpoint, I mean, I think your lean probably would be with Justin Thomas and Webb Simpson, but I just love how John Rahm and Xander are playing, and there's certainly no slouches in the off the tee and particularly in the approach department. So those are, I know they're the most expensive guys, and I know Webb's history is probably a little bit better here, but I think those are the 2 that I like the most.
The Xander thing. Let's talk about Xander here for a second, Greg, because the way that I kind of viewed last week was, what's that situation? An immovable object versus an unstoppable force. You've got a guy who is just on the top of his game. He's got like 11 straight top 25s. He's just feeling it. And he gets to a place that has absolutely just stunned him, and he hasn't been able to do anything. And he starts a little slow, grinds throughout the entire week, and ends up T2. And now I'm like, oh my gosh, like if Xander's even figuring it out on courses that have historically had his number, watch out, man. Like I'm so much more bullish on Xander 5 days later than I was, 5 days ago.
It's a good point. The last week really changes your opinion, but I will say Torrey Pines is an interesting case for Xander Schauffele. It's a place that's in his hometown. Everybody's talked about that a lot. He's only made 1 cut before last week. Everybody's talked about that as well. I wonder if there's a little bit of a home course curse kind of a thing going on that was broken. Because if you really think about it, Torrey Pines should be perfect for Xander Schauffele. He does everything well, and he's got a great short game. And that was on display last week. He's a great putter. He was, I think he was second in scrambling last week. And a lot of that was made up in putting on the greens. So for a player like Xander Schauffele to come in tied second at Torrey Pines, I think that's what we should expect to see. And I think the four missed cuts before that were the anomaly. So this week, now we have a guy who has 3 starts at the Waste Management, and they're all better than T17. He's got a T17, a T10, and a T16. So that's okay. I think he's in really good form coming in. So I expect Xander to improve on that. I'm just not sure, Rick, and see, I'm not sure he's my favorite in this grouping.
Okay, who is?
Probably because he's 11,000. I think Justin Thomas is my favorite here. Look, recent form, very important. And iron play is really important. That's why Webb Simpson's so interesting. Webb, by the way, the forgotten guy, is coming off a T17 and a T4. So he checks all the boxes as well. right? Webb checks all the boxes. I just feel like Justin Thomas sitting there is the third most expensive player in the world, in the field, and he's the third ranked player in the world. To me, that's a great sign. It's a great mix. I know he missed the cut in overseas in Abu Dhabi, he's played great before that on the PGA Tour. So I'm looking for Justin Thomas coming off of back-to-back third place finishes in this event, the best iron player in the world, who's been playing great except for one event. I think he comes back and gets a win this week, quite frankly.
Yeah, and I mean, he flies to the Middle East. He is dealing with sponsors dropping him, trying to figure out what's going on. He's trying to make amends for getting caught on a hot mic. I mean, there's more than golf going on for Justin Thomas in the past couple of weeks, and you can almost say, listen, you miss a cut in Abu Dhabi, no big deal. You come back to a place where iron play is so critical, and to your point, Greg, he is the best iron player on the planet. So the two that you mentioned, JT and Webb, like. Yeah, as much as I can get of both of them. Webb Simpson, he probably should have won at Waialae. He probably should have won that event. He still finishes fourth. That's like this guy's floor. He is so good. He's going to defend his crown here, and I just love everything about him. But there's a name, Sia, that we need to talk about, and it's Rory McIlroy. And I was diving a bit deep into Rory this morning, and I was going through the logs and I was running the numbers, and the time frame that I like to use is since the restart. It's a finite frame. Everybody kind of restarted at the same time, and I'm looking at fantasy results and median results. Rory McIlroy and Emiliano Grillo are exactly the same. It's insane. Yeah. It's crazy. It's crazy. 73 DraftKings points is their median. One of them routinely $3,000 more expensive than the other.
Yeah, and by the way, I'm a Grillo truther, so that doesn't actually surprise me at all. Rory, to your point, since the restart, he just hasn't really been the same Rory. We see flashes of it one round or two, like we saw a week and a half ago in Abu Dhabi. And I wonder, by the way, if that travel may have affected him. And to the extent we believe that, I think we can apply that to Justin Thomas as well. I mean, that's 17, 20 hours in the air to get back. So it's something to consider. But as far as picking Rory McIlroy from a DFS standpoint, I almost think it's a contrarian play at this point, because the arguments for the other four guys are so compelling that at this price range, it doesn't make a lot of sense to take Rory when we've just seen him just so off. I mean, he was so average, if not below average on Sunday coming in. He's not putting well. I mean, it almost seems to be like something in his head at this point. And to me, he's more of a contrarian play because there's such compelling arguments for at least 3 or 4 other guys in this range.
And Sia, the final, I don't know if you guys saw Justin Ray's stat today about Rory in the final round, but I have it right here. He was in rounds 1 through 3 since the beginning of 2020 worldwide, scoring average of 69.1, and in the final round 70.8. So it goes, and 2020 includes a string of top 5 finishes at the beginning before the restart. He finished everything inside the top 6. So. Look, I don't think that the Sunday performance at Torrey had anything to do with traveling. I think this is kind of what Rory has been. And for a guy in the 10, above 10,500, at 10.6, you're looking for a win. And I don't think you can have that confidence right now with Rory. And
a shot and a half or whatever it is between those two differences doesn't sound like much. It's huge. Like that average, those two numbers that you get, it's a massive difference. Jumping down into the $9,000 range, led off by Hideki Matsuyama. He plays okay here. Daniel Berger, Sungjae Im, Harris English, Ryan Palmer, my current favorite player on earth, Scotty Scheffler, and Will Zalatoris. Gentlemen, when you start to look at course horses, there is probably few golfers who can boast what Hideki has done at Waste Management. You think Cantlay at Shriners, you think Webb at Wyndham, you think I guess Rory at Eastlake. I mean, there's a couple other, but like this is like Hideki at Waste Management. Sia, the back-to-back wins. He's got another couple of top 20 finishes. He's been constantly in contention. It's unbelievable, but I have a lot of questions about the form that he's in right now.
Yeah, and recent form has been a little checkered, and I feel like, listen, it's a reasonable price for Decky, but I feel like every time I consider Decky from a DFS standpoint, I'm always kind of shrugging my shoulders, like, yeah, I guess this is an okay play. And when once Sunday comes and we finish the tournament, it turns out it was just an okay play. I mean, there's other guys I like here. Listen, I would never argue with somebody that wants to play Decky in this particular tournament, given the history and his ball striking metrics. But I mean, I'm probably going to pivot to like a Daniel Berger, for example, who I think, I mean, his history here is pretty solid. His recent form is pretty good. And speaking of the restart, I mean, this guy was, we thought maybe, right before the restart and right after the restart, I think we thought, hey, Daniel Berger is about to make a name for himself in terms of like cracking that top 5, top 6 sort of golfer in terms of how how talented we think he is. He's sort of fallen off, but his recent form is pretty good, actually. And his form here has been pretty good. So Berger, for me, is probably going to be the pivot. And honestly, you flashed up just now Will Zalatoris. I think that's a pretty smart play. Listen, we're talking about approach, right? I mean, I know we don't have a ton of rounds on Will Zalatoris, but man, that guy not only was great last week with no course experience, but his approach numbers are pretty astounding.
I'll actually play devil's advocate on Willie Z here for a second. So what I like to do, again, look at the restart and strokes gained approach. Greg Russell Henley's been number 1 in the restart. He's got like 50 something rounds. He's gaining like 1.08 strokes on approach per round. Will Zalatoris is right behind him, but Will only has like 14 or 15 measured rounds. I'd actually argue that we miss out on some of his, we don't have his Bermuda Championship finish where he had a top 10 there because there's no shot link data. There's a chance in a small sample size that Zalatoris is the best iron player in this field. Obviously, not the resume, not the pedigree as some of these other guys, but in a small sample. And we saw flashes of that last week.
It's an extremely small sample. Justin Thomas is in this field.
Sure. I would not. Don't get me wrong. Yeah, for sure.
You'd have a hard time convincing me that he's better than Webb Simpson as well. Because the pedigree for those guys goes on for so long. But no, that's no discredit to Will Zalatoris. I don't think there's anything he could do to make me think he's a better iron player. He doesn't have the time yet. I mean, he could have 3 wins, and I wouldn't put him ahead of Justin Thomas at this point.
If he had 3 wins, we'd be foaming at the mouth right now.
Yeah, we are already. I mean, the guy is, and he's comfortable now, right? He has his place. He's a PGA Tour player now. This is no longer dip your toe in the pool and see how it goes. He's earned his way out here. And so I'm really looking forward to see what Will Zalatoris does. And I do think he's a good play. But I think the guy in this range is a guy Sia mentioned. I think it's Daniel Berger. I think he's the play here. I look at the tied the solo 10th at the Century Tournament of Champions, the tied 7th in Hawaii. His iron play, he's I want to say 54th this year. Strokes gained approach the green, and he was 30. Oh, he's 56th this year, so he was 34th last year. But his the actual number has gone up. Of strokes gained per round. So I think Daniel Berger is the guy. And I love the way he putts. He's 25th so far this year on the PGA Tour strokes gained putting, and you're going to need to make some birdies. So I'm looking at Berger. You could talk me into Sung Jae Im as well, but I'm looking at Berger for being my guy this week.
I'll make it a round of burgers because I love this guy too. We cannot get out of this tier without talking about Ryan Palmer for just a second. I tweeted this out this morning because I don't think people realize how good he's been and why he is deserving of this $9,200 price tag. So since the start of 2020, the calendar year, so January 2020, 4th in median fantasy points, 2nd in value. He has scored 70 or more fantasy points in over half of his starts, and he's scored 80 or more in 5 straight. I mean, his price is coming up. It should be coming up, but Sia, he has been a staple in a lot of my lineups over the course of the past couple of weeks. I don't know if we'll get there this week because there's a lot of great options in the 9s, but like what he's doing really needs to be talked about.
Yeah, and after the break, it's funny because we talked about this last week. He was 7,000 on DraftKings right after the break, okay? And he finished 4th. And then people started paying attention, so he jumped up to 9,200. Then last week, he's 8,400. And now he's back to 9,200. So for me, I think Ryan Palmer is great. but I think maybe he's probably been priced out just a little bit. That doesn't mean I'm not going to have any of him, but I don't know. Ryan Palmer is just one of those names that just doesn't really get the respect. And I'm assuming in the next, month or two, we're going to start to talk about Ryan Palmer, much like we talk about maybe Daniel Berger or even Hideki Matsuyama. I mean, in terms of, hey, this guy can go out there and get you a top 5 if his game is on.
One last guy, Greg, before we move on, and I don't know what to do with Scotty Scheffler. He has now missed 2 cuts in a row. The one at Torrey Pines was especially ugly because he was 1 shot off the first round lead, and then he shot like 78 or 79 or something, and goes out and misses the cut. And he's played this event once; he's missed the cut there. I'm just here scratching my head, unsure of what to do.
Ever since he tested positive for COVID, he hasn't really been the same. I'm not saying that that's why, but there just seems to be that point where he was hot. He was one of the hotter players on the PGA Tour. And since then, it's kind of cooled off and he hasn't really been able to find the rhythm yet. So for me, in a range like this is just like the way Sia and I would agree with him about Rory in the 10s. You have so many great options in this range. There are so many players that check boxes of recent form and iron play, recent form and iron play, recent form and iron play. And Scotty's missing one. So it's hard for me to play him. As long as he stays up in the $9,000 range, high 8s, I think I'm okay with being late on him. If he starts to get below maybe that 8,500 and he's at a course where I feel really good, then I think I might take a chance on him if the form doesn't change. And if the form does change, the price will reflect it. So for now, I'm going to be late on Scotty.
Okay. Sounds good. I will probably also take the same approach. We're going to jump down to the 8K range. There are some questions in the comments about guys in this range that I want to make sure we get to, but first we're going to take a quick break and hear a word from our partners. And we're back. $8,000 range led off by Louis Oosthuizen. There are plenty of question marks here between Brooks Koepka, Matthew Wolff, Ricky Fowler, Butson's here, Billy Horschel's here, Gary Woodland's here. We rounded out with Russell Henley, Siwoo Kim, and Brian Harmon. Sia, let's start with Siwoo Kim. There were some questions let's not start with Siwoo Kim. Let's start with Matthew Wolff. There were some questions in the chat about Matthew Wolff about whether he is still in the field. As of right now, he is. We have not heard anything different. He obviously withdrew from the Farmers Insurance Open, citing a hand injury. He was, I think, 7 over after this round. What would have to happen between now and Thursday morning for Matthew Wolff to be in your lineups?
He would have to turn into a completely different golfer. He just doesn't look. I mean, I'm just being honest with you. I like Matthew Wolff, but he's not in a good zone right now. He wasn't in a good zone before we had the break, and he isn't in one now. I mean, he withdrew, and then the tournament before that, he wasn't very good. Off the tee, he hasn't been very good. He almost looks to me like Carlos Ortiz looked yesterday on his back nine, where he's just trying to figure it out and he's just kind of confused. And it's just not, listen, I don't like this price range very much, but to the extent I have guys in this price range, Matthew Wolff's not going to be one of them, regardless of whether he gets a clean bill of health or he gives himself a clean bill of health this week.
I think that's the key. Is even before last week, the weapon, the driver was letting him down. It was certainly, by his own standards, it was not very good. And then, of course, he just ran into a buzzsaw that is the South Course at Torrey Pines. Greg, I look at some of these other guys in this range here. We've got Ricky Fowler. You want to talk about course history? You want to talk about past winners? You want to talk about guys that set up well for TPC Scottsdale? It's certainly Ricky, but we are still trying to figure out what the heck is going on with his game right now.
Yeah, I don't feel very confident with him. I just had this thought. His coach, John Tillery, is great. There's no question about it. But I think back to when Ricky made the switch and he made a coaching change. And the thing that was holding him back, in my opinion, wasn't mechanics at all. And I feel like Ricky, just by making a change, it does not matter who he's making a change to or what they're changing. It's just he added a variable to me with his game and changing his golf swing. And I don't think it was necessary at this point. I don't think that Ricky was being held back by the mechanics of his golf swing. I think there were other things for him to work on at that time. So again, Ricky's another one of those guys I'm going to root for, but he's not going to make it in my lineups this week.
let me ask you this, Greg. What would you describe over the years, what we know from Ricky Fowler? What's the best part of his game?
His putting and his wedge
Scott,
play is great.
yeah,
He's very well rounded.
Yeah.
But yeah, the putter is.
The
And it hasn't been great.
It's been bad. Yeah, this is what my biggest concern is. His last 3 measured events, he's lost strokes putting in all of them. Each of the last 3. I could only find one other time in the last 6 years that he went 3 consecutive events losing strokes putting. So we can talk about the swing all we want. We know that he switched to that mallet or half mallet, whatever it is, and I don't know. I mean, guys that are rolling it well don't usually switch their gear. Like that's right. The short of it.
To me, Rick, that's allocation of time. And we had him on the podcast talking about it, and he said it helped him start the ball online more. The putter, the new putter, which means to me, he's trying to save time. He's not able to work on his putting as much. So he's losing control of the line. So he switches putters to try to take a variable out. And that is all a result of the time that he's spending working on his golf swing. He's trying to rework a motion here that takes time, and other areas of your game slip. And now he doesn't have either. And I think this is ultimately what we're looking at, is a allocation of time that has kind of let his strength slide a little bit. Will it come back? Yeah, it'll come back at some point. But I think it's still going to be a while. I think Ricky's still a ways away.
Okay. I'm focusing a bit on Bubba Watson here, Sia. He's someone who's been excellent off the tee. He's been pretty good on approach in the last couple of months. And while he has good history here at TPC Scottsdale, he's never closed one out. He's going to try to change that this week. Is there anybody else in the bottom half of this $8,000 range, whether it's Gary Woodland, Russell Henley, Siwoo Kim, that is interesting you this week?
Yeah, my initial thought was fade Gary Woodland, and I'm still there. I kind of liked Siwoo Kim until I looked at his course history here, and it's not very good. I think I'm settling on Russell Henley, and honestly, I kind of want your opinions on this because his recent history is kind of up and down. He's missed some cuts. In fact, he was my one and done at the American Express, and we know how well that went. And the funny part was I actually thought he was a safer play, and here I kind of think he's a safer play with those approach numbers that are so good for him, but I'm not so sure it is a safe play, especially when you look at his history here. I mean, it's missed cut, it's 15. It's missed cut, it's 16th. So I don't know what, I hate this range, but I think Henley is my favorite guy in the range.
Well, that history here is kind of his recent history, right? So his history at Waste Management, cut 15, cut 16th. His history, his lead-in form, cut 11th, cut 30th. I mean, this is kind of what he does. So like, if that interests you, if you're willing to take on the missed cut equity for potentially top 10 upside, especially at a course that I think really does lend itself to ball strikers, you've got a good ball striker here. So I by no means think he's safe, but I do think he's a viable option. Greg, anybody else here? You know, we didn't talk a lick about Brooks. We didn't say a word about Louis Oosthuizen. Is there anybody else we should talk about here?
I think Louis could be an option, but he's way up at the top of that range. And I think you may be able to get him, maybe if you stack him with a Zalatoris or something, you may be able to get him with some nice lineups with a couple of the options in the 9K, but he's just kind of just outside of the price range where I really like Louis. So I was right there with Sia, where I'm in between Gary Woodland and Russell Henley. And I think Gary Woodland is trending in the right direction. He doesn't necessarily check my boxes with the iron play, right? The iron play hasn't been great as of late, hasn't been great on the year, but I just have a feeling that he's trending in the right direction, if that makes sense. And sometimes you got to go on a little bit of a feeling when you get down into the eights. In the 10K plus in an event like this and the 9K, we can check all the boxes. Get down here. Now, all of a sudden, we start to have question marks. So when I'm looking at Gary Woodland, I love his course history. He's won here. He's got 3 top 10s. He's got and he's got 4 top 25s total, and he's only missed 2 cuts. So there's a safety element to this as well. And he did play very well at the American Express. And you could argue he played pretty well last week at the Farmers Insurance Open. He had 2 bad rounds in the middle of the tournament, and you could throw that to the difficult conditions on Friday and Saturday. He shot a nice round of 70 on Sunday. So I think Gary Woodland's trending in the right direction, and I might go that way.
Interesting. And there's a good question from the chat here. When was the last time Brooks was in the 8,000s? I'm looking back. I see one time, RBC Heritage, June 2020. He was 8,600. He finished 7th. Outside of that, it has been a while. WGC Bridge.
If you took away his name, Rick, if you took away his name, where do you think he would be priced based on his stats and recent form?
Let's look at this. So he has missed 3 straight cuts. He doesn't have, I mean, he's won this event, I guess, but he's got 42nd and 41st in his last 2 trips, and he hasn't played it. I bet you he would be 7,700. I think he's $1,100 too expensive.
Wow. Yeah. I think that may even be.
It's high.
I think it'd be lower. I was thinking maybe like 7 flat.
I was going to say 7,100 or something.
I mean, he's still, he's 4 starts removed from a top 10 at the Masters.
Yeah. So, fair point.
True.
Fair, very fair. And he had a nice PGA championship, and he's done great the week before majors. Yeah, that's fair. So, but somewhere in the 7s, definitely.
Yeah, still too expensive, right? Yeah. At 8,800, it's definitely wrong. Speaking of the 7s, this is a very interesting range. I think there's some really chalky guys in here. I think there's some interesting plays in here. It starts off with Corey Connors and Max Homa. It goes all the way down to Martin Laird, Patton Kizzire, Shea Reve, Ches Reavie. Is there someone or someones that is most exciting to you in this 7K range?
Yeah, I'm all about ball strikers here. And Corey Connors and Emiliano Grillo, I did say I was the president of his fan club. Now Grillo's history here isn't very good. And frankly, his recent history isn't amazing. But I just still like him. I just still like the strokes gain metrics on approach. In particular, and off the tee. And Corey Connors really measures out well, and his recent history is good. The one kind of sleeper guy I'll give you in this range, if there is such a thing in the 7K range, is Michael Thompson. He's been really, really good lately. He's not great off the tee. That might hurt him a little bit here, but his approach numbers lately have been really good. And I believe, let's see, in his last 4, 5th, 25th, 21st, and 15th. Pretty good for a guy named Michael Thompson.
I'm pretty sure I run the optimal lineup every week when the dust settles, and Michael Thompson's been in the optimal lineup probably 2 of those 4 weeks. He just because he's been so cheap, and he makes birdies, or there was a week where he made, I think he made 2 eagles. Maybe it was the American Express. I mean, so like the fantasy scoring certainly goes a long way. I look at this $7,000 range, and Greg, I see Brendan Steele, and I say, Brendan Steele's coming off a 4th. He's coming off of a 21st. He's missed 2 cuts here in a row, but he made his 8 previous to that. And I just think I don't think people dislike Brendan Steele, because I don't think there's anything to really dislike. I just don't think he ever gets played. I think they look at what he did at the Sony Open and say that was a failure, when in reality it was a 4th place finish. He's a good ball striker. That's a guy that I think is an interesting pivot from someone like a Henrik Norlander, who will probably be one of the highest owned golfers in the 7K range this week.
So I'm glad you brought up Norlander, because I want to get to him, because I really like what he's got going on. But to speak on Brendan Steele, the concern with Brendan Steele to me is it's not just what happened at the Sony Open, but last year we had very similar occurrences. There were a number of times where he got himself into contention, had a chance to win, and fades. And in fantasy, that gets you get your hopes so high, right?
But that's the only thing. Because in reality, Greg, if you sign me up for a 4th place finish right now, but the problem is you was in 1st and you see your currently winning number, and then when he drops down to 4th, it's even worse. So it's like I get it, but
and how far is the slide this time, right? Is it 4th or is it 11th or is it? Yeah, where does you don't know? Is it a 77? Where does he go? And that is why I think people get a little afraid of him, because there's a tendency to not perform on Sunday. And it's concerning. I know it's concerning to me. I love last week having a Francesco Molinari in the lineup, who's kind of, he made the cut. That's nice, but he's not doing anything. I thought he would have a good week, but I'm wrong. And all of a sudden it's a T9. That's totally different than the Brendan Steele T4. Totally different. So I don't know, but let me get to Henrik Norlander.
Yeah, talk to us.
Because he checks all the boxes. And I'm at a point at 7,500. I don't care if he's popular. I love what he's got going on. He missed a number of cuts for a while in the middle of this season. He was coming off 4 missed cuts in a row. Mm-hmm. But then he has tied 12th at the American Express, tied second last week at the Farmers. It's important because the American Express is a different kind of event. It's a birdie fest, right? The Sanderson Farms earlier in the year where he came in tied 4th is a birdie fest, and the Farmers is tough. So this tells me this guy, I think he's really playing well. Last year, he was very accurate off the tee and he was putting great. And that's why he kind of popped into some lineups. But this year, his iron game has gotten a lot better from what I'm noticing. He's 31st in strokes gained approach the green for the year, and he's played 10 tournaments. So there is the sample size is growing, and he's hit 74% of his greens regulation. So I'm looking at that guy saying, okay, recent form is good. Last 2 events have been great. He's got to be riding high on confidence. And his approach game improved tremendously from last year. So I think he's a guy who's found something. And I'm going to go popular or not, I'm going to take him in my lineup this week. Many of my lineups this week.
He was second in strokes gained tee to green last week. Molinari that you speak of was third. Thanks to our friends over at William Hill, I have a 100-1 Francesco Molinari Masters ticket, which I don't know how I feel about, but he might be back, Greg.
Yeah, I think he is. We talked about it a little bit last week. And look, we'll see what happens with Molinari. But he could be back. And I like what I'm seeing so far. Is he Masters back? I don't know, but 100-1. That's nice.
Could you imagine? Could you imagine he's leading the Masters? He gets to the 12th hole on Sunday. Like, imagine what's going through this guy's head for a second time.
You think about what has happened to him since then, right? Since that shot, he has disappeared. Yeah. The last 2 weeks, maybe he's making a little resurgence. So hopefully.
Yeah. Easing back into it. I'll be quick on 2 guys here, Sia. The 2 that stick out to me the most, I think, in this range is Max Homa. So if you want to talk about guys who are back, quote unquote, he had a 5-event stretch of top 25s before the shutdown. Could never rekindle that after the restart until recently. He's got back-to-back top 20s, essentially. One of them was the 21st. And he has a 6th place finish here last year, and he striped it. I think he was 8th in approach last week. And then I'm looking down at the bottom here, and I see Sebastian Munoz, who his name always seems to pop up on this podcast. And I just think I think at $7,100, he could arguably be the most mispriced golfer on this slate with kind of what the rest of his peers look like. I mean, Sebastian Munoz should not be the same price as Sepp Straka and Wyndham Clark. That is what I'm getting at here.
I agree with that.
Yeah, you're looking for upside, right? And Sebastian Munoz has it. He's often a guy I have as a first round leader because he can go 7 under, 8 under in a day, and you're hoping he can do it for 3 days, and all of a sudden you've got a premium DFS lineup. By the way, guys, Henrik Norlander, if you guys want to hit 100-1 shot and you don't want to wait for Francesco at the Masters, he's 100-1 here. And honestly, if you don't think his upside is capped, and I think Greg made a really good argument that maybe it's not 100-1. I mean, that's a nice little play there, I think.
William Hill in Nevada actually has a better number on him at 120. So I might just click that little guy right here while we're on the show. All right. While I do that, why don't we move down to the $6,000 range, and Sia, you can kick us off here. So this is Cameron Tringale, Dylan Fratelli, JT Poston, all the way down to, hold on, is Michael Kim made a cut last week, and he actually made a cut 3 weeks ago, Greg. I know we've been thinking about this for a while. We forgot to mention this.
Yeah, I didn't know he made it last week. I'm fired up to hear that because that's not an easy one to make. But I did know that he made it 3 weeks ago, so that kind of it relieved a lot of my Michael Kim pressure. But good for him. Hopefully, he's making a comeback.
65th at the Sony, 53rd at the Farmers. So that's at the min price. It's well worth it if he makes the cut. But Sia, who do you like in this range?
So a couple guys that don't really grade out well here, but golfers that I usually lean on down in this range. Stuart Sink is one of them. And I want to mention Davis Riley real quick, just because I do think he has some upside here. Corn Ferry Tour guy that I think this is his first PGA event. You guys correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Davis Riley at 6,100 down there. If you want to not in a single entry or a 3 max, but maybe if you're playing a bigger tournament, I think he's an interesting play. And then Doc Redman and Joel Damon. Listen, their course history here isn't very good. Their recent history isn't very good, but I just happen to think they just haven't found their form yet. And I think both of those guys have plenty of upside in this range.
Davis Riley played something, but he might have played it as an amateur. US Open, maybe, Greg? Am I
his name?
Remembering that right?
His name popped up here on the first cut. We talked about him on the first cut.
I have it right.
I don't know if it was the U.S. Open, but we definitely have brought that name up.
So he played. Okay, so he played the U.S. Open. He missed the cut. Then I think he turned pro. I could be very wrong about this, but no, that can't be right because he played the Korn Ferry Tour before that. Then I'm all confused. But Davis Riley did play the U.S. Open. He missed the cut. He played the Sanderson Farms. He missed the cut. Those were his last 2 PGA events. I don't know who else I was thinking of.
He was very good on the Korn Ferry Tour. Him and Will Zalatoris were very good on the Korn Ferry Tour.
Correct. The middle of 2020, he won on the Korn Ferry Tour. He won in San Antonio. He backed up with a top 10. He had another top 10 a couple weeks later. Yes, he actually won twice on the Korn Ferry last year. So that's where we were talking about him or whatever.
That means something.
Yeah, for sure. And you're never going to get any qualms from me for playing Doc Redman, who's a great ball striker, and we're getting just an absolutely depressed salary at $6,600. Greg, I look at the $6,000 range. I see guys like Kevin Streelman, that kind of mold. I see guys like Kyle Stanley, who's won this event before. Is there anybody else that we're missing?
I am going back and forth on whether or not I should go here because this is, I have a reputation to uphold. Okay. And I have, with this player, I have been known as a little bit of a whisperer.
Wait, can I guess who this is?
Yeah.
I'm hoping it's Richie Werenski.
Yeah. There you go. So I've gone to Richie Werenski once in my career. And it was a great story from last year.
Let me set the table. So we were doing our picks, and the way we had it set up last year is we would do pick to win, top 10, sleeper, and we'd be like, pick to win would be like a top 8 guy. Your top 10 would be like one of the top guys who wasn't going to win, and then sleeper would be like somebody in like the 50 or 60 to 1 range. And Greg wasn't on the show, and just in the outline dropped in Richie Werenski like 120 to 1 or something, and we joked like, what is he talking about? And also, like, I want him to explain himself. He's not even on the show to explain himself. And I think Richie Werenski goes out. He's the first round leader, Greg. He finished. I don't know what he finished, but it was like top
4-hole lead or something. He was in the final group, and Sunday didn't go great. It was the 3M Open, and he ended up winning his very next start at Barbasol
or Barracuda.
Yeah, I get those two mixed up. But one of those. So Richie, I have a feeling this week. I think I'm gonna go with it. I have to at this point. Wow. So I think this could be a Richie Werenski week. Now he played last week and it didn't go great on Sunday. And look, this is a big turn. This has happened to Richie before. He's played well and Sunday hasn't gone great. And that can happen. So am I eating my words of what I said about Brendan Steele? I don't think so. And the reason for that is he's down in the 6K range. Mm-hmm. So it's just a different expectation that you have. And he has a tied 21st at the American Express with a 75 on Sunday and a tied 60th at the Farmers Insurance Open with 79 on Sunday. So I'm looking at a guy who's in really good form and he's got a 1-day hurdle to jump. And if he can do it, I think he'll be a great value play down in this range. So I've been kind of chalky, a little bit safe in the higher portions of this board. And I think with Richie down here, I think we could take a shot on Richie.
Yeah, it's definitely a big difference, especially in your Steele comparison, because he's like $1,000 cheaper. So it's all right. If he's 79, whatever.
And I think Richie, I feel like has less experience in the moment, which may sound like a bad thing, but I think it's actually a good thing. It's not like he's scarred yet to where Brendan Steele's a veteran and he knows how hard it is. And he knows all of these. Richie's still young. So he's 29 years old. I think Richie's feeling like he's 1 round away. I'm not sure Brendan Steele's in the same place. Maybe that's unfair, but I like Richie this week.
All right. Gentlemen, Waste Management Open, Super Bowl. Can I say that? The big game coming up on Sunday. Maybe we'll bleep that out. I don't know. Producer Jacob, thank you very much. Greg DuCharme, thank you very much. You can find Greg at The Real GFD. Nejad, thank you very much. You can find him on Twitter at Nejad. You can find me at Rick Run Good. This has been The First Cut, and we'll catch you next time.